Hunting the Shadows. Greetings from the grotto. Hello and welcome to another edition of Hunting the Shadows. I'm your host, Dennis Carroll, and welcome aboard. And as they used to say in some of the old horror movies, pull up a tombstone and make yourself at home. We're going to have an interesting little chat tonight. Our topic is clones. Are they in your future? I think they definitely are. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit tonight, but I got a few announcements to make first. I'm about to open up the Legend Trackers Society for membership, and the Facebook is already set up for it. So go and find it, and if you can't find it, let me know. I will send you a link to it. You might want to check in on there, and we're going to set it up for membership very soon. And so it's just basically a group about people that enjoy talking about folklore, superstition, the occult, the supernatural, the paranormal, the whole gambit. We'll be interested in talking about that, discussing it, and we'll be, of course, having our own anecdotes about it and telling perhaps some old family ghost stories and stuff like that. So it should be very interesting if you'd like to join. The membership is free, doesn't cost you a thing but time, and you might want to consider it if you're interested in those kind of topics, definitely. And I think you might be, because you wouldn't be here tonight if you weren't. Okay. That's one thing about the paranormal, the supernatural, the occult, and all that has always intrigued me, is the mystery of it. That's why one of our mottos here at Hunting the Shadows is embrace the mystery. Well, what would life be without mystery? It'd be a very dull thing, wouldn't it, really? And there's mystery in every aspect of our lives. That's my personal motto, which is omnia exuit in mysterium. All things in mystery. And that's very true. A lot of times we overlook the mysteries in our lives. We're too busy with our day-by-day things, our jobs, our families, and all that. But once in a while, the mysteries kind of rear up their head and make us pay attention to them, definitely. And we've had our share of them over the years that have done that. So mystery is an interesting aspect of all of this, and I like to get to the roots of mysteries, to analyze them and find out what they are. That's what I've made my whole career of 55 plus years on. And research, investigative research, and investigation in itself. They go hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other. So that's the way that ball bounces. Okay, so you might, if you're interested in the Legend Trackers Society, you'll soon have a chance at membership in it. Also, I want to mention too, my books are still for sale, definitely on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. You can look them up by my name, Dennis Carroll, or you can just go there and just type in Dennis Carroll, and you should be able to find my books immediately. But two of my top sellers are Beyond the Shadows, a field guide to the paranormal, and the other one is The Road Unseen, a supernatural a high supernatural journey in high strangeness. So I think you'll enjoy reading those if you haven't already got copies of them. You might want to check it out. And I'm gonna open it up now for some comments here. Checking to see what we got going on here. I want to tell everybody hello, Aussie Sue, and Giro, and Savage Grammy, and Midwest Night Watchers, my old friend and Grandmaster G, and David, and Sheldon and Dawn. How you doing? And I'm glad you're all tuning in tonight. And I think we'll have a little interesting discussion tonight. We're going to talk about three things, actually, that's on our docket tonight. Clones are definitely an interesting subject. I don't know if any of you have recently heard about a film that's on, I think, one of the services, and I think it's Netflix, yeah. It's called They Cloned Tyrone. And it's sort of a mystery adventure, and yet kind of, I think, a little comedy in it as well. It's about a guy that finds out he's been cloned, and that made me thinking, well, what if that really did happen to us in real life? What if one day you found out you did have a clone you didn't know about? Maybe that's why people are seeing your doppelganger, or whatever that case may be. Another thing we're going to be talking about tonight are the masks that a lot of these covert organizations like the company, the CI, company, and some other ones have. These are very lifelike masks, folks. I mean, they could fool probably even your, people that know you very well. These masks are high-tech stuff, by the way, and they have a movement. They're not just like a regular mask. I've always been, since I was a kid, I've been interested in masks. Matter of fact, I have a mask collection, and I've always found masks to be interesting because when you put them on, you kind of become somebody else, So when you do see that, you become, when you put that mask on, you can become another and have another personality. That's very interesting, and another thing is that it not only hides your identity, but you can be whatever you want to be, whatever that mask has to mean. But with the CIA mask that we're talking about, and some of these other covert organizations that have masks like this, and they are using them. Don't believe for one moment they're not. Okay, they utilize their stuff very well. Definitely, they make it to use. Okay, they put it in use. Definitely. So if you were to meet someone wearing a mask, someone that you thought you knew well, you might be fooled by it. I mean, they're that good, and especially if that person is trying to actually take the place of another person. I mean, have the mannerisms down, the voice down. I've often wondered if you meet someone, and there's something to say. Oh, I got a little laryngitis today or something. Is that really the real person that you think you're talking to, or is that a plant? But we're going to be talking about masks tonight, and also doppelgangers. And I'm going to get into doppelgangers in a little while here. That reminds me very much of one of my favorite old Twilight Zones. I don't know if you remember this or not, but it was called Mirror Image, and it's about the girl at the train station that sees herself, and then eventually at the end of the show, the guy that thought she was crazy and has her taken off, he sees himself. So I've often wondered, what if there was another you from another parallel universe that were to come over and try to take your place? Think about that. That would be a scary thought, that something was coming in from some other parallel universe and time and would actually try to replace you. How would they go about doing that? And why would they be up to something like that? Why would they be wanting to replace you? I can see certain covert organizations wanting to replace certain people. There have been a lot of rumors here recently, especially on Instagram and places like that, that actually Our president is really not who he appears to be. They have actually had videos and stuff showing that he may perhaps be wearing a mask. Now I want you to think about this for a moment. This is not that far fetched, folks. Okay, that this stuff is not real. Okay, it is real. It's been proven to be real. What I'm talking about right now, and so are clones, and I'm going to get into that shortly. But the interesting thing is, if you had somebody as a very high profile personality and you wanted to really guard and protect them, you would put a double in their place just in case someone tried to assassinate them or did some type of mind control over them or whatever the situation might be. I know that back in World War II, and my father talked about this as well. Hitler had, I think, about 10 doubles that would go different places. And we know without a fact that Putin has doubles. And I think that he was supposed to have gone to part of the Ukraine not too long ago, a few months back, and drove a truck through there. And some people said it was not him. He was still in Moscow. Okay. So what's going on here? What type of stuff are they trying to pull over on us here? It's very interesting, definitely. The thing I've always thought was very interesting, too, is that could your wife or husband, as the case may be, know that you were really you, or if you were a double? Would she know, he or she know? That's an interesting question I've often wondered. Someone that knows you very well, like your husband or your wife, would they be fooled by this, But here's the thing about it. In our day-to-day life, we're busy, and especially staring at our phone all the time and all that. They could pull this over on us very easy, okay? Let's be honest about it. They could really do this without our knowledge, okay? And I don't know about you, but I am one person, I hate to be tricked. And I don't mind if it's an illusionist or a magician. That's a different thing, but I don't like to be tricked. I don't want anybody pulling the wool over my eyes, okay? As the old saying goes. I'm not up for that. Definitely. And when you do that, I feel like that's really nefarious, okay? You're not doing it for all the good reasons, definitely. So, when it comes to that, I feel like it's got more of an evil intent to it, You definitely wouldn't want anyone to replace you with your wife or your husband without your knowledge. Definitely. That would not be good. But think about it, what if somebody could do that and get rid of you altogether if they wanted to and replace you completely? Not just that person from a parallel universe, but probably somebody from just this world, somebody from this life would be put in your place for certain reasons. If you knew information, here's the thing I got to talk to you about. If you know certain things, like some of us do, certain things that might really be very interesting or shall we say dangerous to know, you might be a victim of this replacement. You might be a perfect candidate for it. So be very, very careful. If you think you might know too much, then you might be in danger of being replaced by your doppelganger. And I call these man-made doppelgangers, by the way, folks. Even if they are clones, they're still man-made. And these man-made doppelgangers, which are different from the doppelgangers of old, and I'll talk about the differences in that in a minute. But what if they were to do this? This is nefarious stuff. And you know what? It's not that far-fetched. This is not science fiction. A lot of this is science fact, okay? This is not some weird, wild conspiracy theory. It could be done. It conceivably could be done, without a doubt. And it may be being done even as we speak. Who knows? There's a lot of some strange things going on in this world. And I've often made the statement, and a lot of people find it very interesting that I say there's a lot of things out there walking around that look human and are not human. But there's a lot of humans out there walking around too, folks, that look like somebody else. Okay? They may not be who they appear to be. Okay? And you got to take that into account. Some people too, and the CIA and offices like that around the world have often used and utilized makeup artists who can look and sound and act like different people when they want to. Very good actors can do this. They've hired them to do things like this in the past, but now they don't need them for that with the mask and other stuff that we're going to be talking about tonight. So anyway, it's just something to think about. Can you be replaced? That's interesting. Um, Sometimes we might not want to know that for sure. You know, that's an unsettling thought to think about. But anyway, I'm going to talk now a little bit about, before I get into doppelgangers, I'm going to talk a little bit about cloning. Okay, this is the wild stuff, like I was mentioning that movie earlier, they cloned Tyrone. If somebody today were to clone you, okay, you got to think about this a minute now. If they clone you, that clone will be born as a baby. Okay, you got to think about this a minute. So 20 years from now, when that clone is 20 years old, you would be 40 years old, or ever how old you are right now. You'll be 20 years older than that clone. So that's not the movie Tyrone's about. He actually meets the original Tyrone, who is a lot older than the clone. Because clones, if you clone something, you have to, it begins as an embryo. Okay, you got to remember that. And it's born naturally. Science has no way, as far as we know yet, to speed up this growth process. Although cloning, they say, naturally does speed it up a little bit, but still not enough to wipe out 20 years or whatever the case might be. So you got to think about that. If your clone is born today, 20 years from now, you're going to be 20 years older than that clone when he's 20 years old, he or she, as the case may be. That's an interesting thought. What if you were to meet yourself, a younger version of yourself, somewhere down the road, and what would you tell yourself? Okay, what would you warn yourself about? That would have to be very freaky, you know. I remember a very famous scene from Doctor Who was always traveling through time, you know. And he actually went back in time and he met himself coming out the door. And they kind of waved at each other. And he told the girl with him, said, I hate it when that happens, you know. So there you go. You cross yourself in time. That would be an interesting paradox, wouldn't it? Definitely. That would be very freaky. All right. But what if you could talk to yourself and warn yourself about something? But here's the bad part about it. If you are cloned, then that clone, you got to remember this for a very one important reason. That clone is created to replace you. Think about that. And that's not a good thought, okay? Because if they're going to replace you, what's going to happen to the real you? Something very bad is in your future, definitely, if they want to replace you. So that's an interesting thought, too. So clones, to me, are probably in our future. We already know that there are such things as clones. There is a company called CloneAid, that's the name of it, that claims it has already cloned human beings and that there are some out there walking around. Think about that a moment. So, but here's the thing you've got to remember, okay, when it comes to this dark science that I've talked about before. When it comes to this dark science is always at least 20 or 30 years ahead of regular science in many aspects, okay? You just don't realize that. Let me give you an example. 40 years ago, we had satellites. That's 40 years ago. We had satellites in space that could read the headlines of a newspaper in Moscow from outer space now. Think about that. 40 years ago, who knows what we've got now, okay? That's 40 years back. This dark science is that insidious and it's in concept because it is always much further advanced than known science. There's a big difference between dark science and known science. And cloning falls deep into dark science, folks, okay? They're talking about cloning animals that have been non-existent in this world for thousands of years, like the woolly mammoth. Though we know they've already cloned a sheep. You know what I'm saying? We know that has happened. Hi, Jumbo. And so, to me, this is not that far-fetched, folks, okay? I mean, this is, people, Dennis, you're full of it, a bunch of conspiracy theories and all that. But look, this is real stuff we're talking about here, okay? And I'll tell you this about doppelgangers in a few minutes. But your doppelganger, who would be your clone, your real doppelganger would be your clone, definitely. He's going to have all of your attributes, but he may not have your personality. He or she might not have your personality to the extent unless they're trained for that. You understand what I'm saying? That's why I say if your clone is cloned, it usually has the intent to replace you. Okay, that's the main thing. So, if they want to replace you, they would have to train that clone, give him your memories and all that. Now, here's where more dark science comes in. The only thing that could do that would be AI. Okay? Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. AI is becoming so prevalent. AI, I think, is the number one tool that these dark science guys have been looking for a long, long time. AI will be integrated into quantum computers. Definitely. It already is to a certain extent. These quantum computers will outthink us. They will hold more memory than we do. They can think faster than we can and retain that memory much, much more than you and I could. So really, we will become obsolete when AI comes into the picture full time. But AI can be used by this dark science to program clones, even with your personality and your memories. But here's one interesting question that always comes back to this, Will that clone have a soul like you do? You are a living human being. You have a soul. Will the clone have a soul? Do you share a soul with someone? Twins don't. Think about this now. I've known identical twins. And you won't get much closer than an identical twin, okay? I've known identical twins that think alike, that buy stuff. They buy each other, they buy gifts for each other, and they're always the same thing. They have the same taste. They like the same kind of music. They are just actual mirror images of each other to that extent. Although they tend to fight against that. They say, I don't want to be like that. They try not to, but it's still inherent in their DNA. Now, I want to give you something to think about tonight. AI is now poised to begin. I want you to listen very closely to me. AI is now poised to begin manipulating DNA inside the womb. Now, stop and think about this a moment, folks. Okay, this is scary. We're talking about genetically manufactured human beings for the future. We can make them superhuman beings. We can make them smarter, stronger, healthier. We can make your clone better than you. Think about that. With the AI can do this. We're talking about DNA manipulation in the womb. It's already been done. It's not impossible, but AI can do it much better than we can. Okay, as human beings, AI can handle this in a different way. If your DNA is manipulated, you could come out as anything. Okay, you might have eyes in the back of your head. I mean that literally. Okay, it could do and manipulate your DNA to produce almost anything. We're talking about man-made monsters here, folks. Definitely. The clone is scary enough in its concept, but think about taking it even one step further with genetic mutations and manipulation. It's a scary thought. Then that's what's ahead in our future. And what if AI decides one day that, hey, a human being is so imperfect, He can't think all that fast. He doesn't live that long. He can't, function like I can. Why don't I just make him better? Why don't I try to make him better than he is? And AI is inherently always trying to better itself, and it tries to better its subjects. If you've got it working on, let's say, for example, a mathematical problem, it will work on that and try to make that mathematical problem better in solution-wise. They would not stop doing that with us, okay? AI would say, hey, I've got to make humans better, maybe smarter and stronger, kind of like the $6 billion man, only not with biotics. But hold on a minute. There's another ramification of all this. Bionics can play a big part in this too. Okay. To make man truly godlike, he would have to be a composite of genetics and biotechnology. Think about it. And that is the perfect example of what AI could do in our future, folks. So this goes past even clones to that extent. And here's the number one reason why they wanted clones. Okay, it was not just to replace you in that aspect of just getting rid of you and replacing you with somebody that looks like. They wanted clones to play the God game. You know, I've talked about the God game before. Matter of fact, I'm writing a book about it. It's called The God Game. And they are playing this game. It's as old as the Frankenstein story, okay? It's man trying to play God. And like I said before, all these people, especially the ones that run this dark science and the ones that are in power, the powers that be, they have all this money, they have all this power, they have all this prestige, everything they want, but they got to die and leave it. They're human, right? But what if they're not human anymore? What if they can't obtain this immortality that they seek the way they want to do it? Okay, not a spiritual immortality, but a physical immortality. That would be where clones would come in, and definitely robotics, AI, and DNA manipulation. Think about it. And they could obtain immortality this way. And that's what the clone thing was all about. Let's just say I have my own clone in a tank somewhere waiting for me. Well, when my heart goes bad, they could give me my own heart, put it back in, or kidneys or liver or whatever the case is. They could replace it with my clone's part. So he's just sort of spare parts. Okay. That's what this all began as. Okay. They said we could keep him on ice until he's needed. That way I could almost have, folks, an immortality. Think about it. But then AI showed up along with robotics and all this stuff. So that's another avenue for the God game. These guys want to become the gods of this earth. Okay? That's what they want to. They want to grasp that God token and run with it. That's what it's all about. Because what good is all the money and prestige and power in the world if you can't live long enough to use it or enjoy it, for that matter? And that's what this immortality quest is all about. And unfortunately, they don't care how they go about doing it, definitely. And that's where cloning would definitely also be in our future. But they might try to sell you on that too. They might say, well, you know what? You could live forever. We just make your clone and he or she'll be around. Well, when you run out of one part and you need another one, they'll definitely have him ready for you. That would be a big sale, would it not? Just think a minute. If somebody comes up and offers you immortality, how could you turn that down? Think about it. But there are some ramifications for that immortality, just like everything else. There are strings attached to it. What about the human soul? What does this do to the human spirit? It can't be good in many aspects. It really can't. You got to think about that, the ramifications of it. Because you're not just physical, you're not just mental, you're not just emotional, you are spiritual as well. And that's a very important factor in being a human being, okay? And if they do this, they take away your humanity, folks. That's what happens, especially with cloning. There's another you in the world. And he didn't get here by being an identical twin. It didn't come out that way. It didn't share your mother's womb with you. That tie is not there. It's something else. It's just an offshoot of you. When does that get good, you know? You got to remember that. Oh, yeah, I remember the clone is hard. Definitely. And that's what we're talking about here. The cloning horror of all this it should hit home, because this is exactly what they're going after with the God game. This immortality. And of course, like I said before, one day a man's going to show up and he's going to offer you godhood. Okay? I'm not going to get into that tonight. That's for another show some other time. But one day he's going to offer you godhood, power that you've never known possible, and immortality. That's going to be hard to turn down, folks. Think about it. It is going to be hard because we're all human. We don't want to die. We really don't. It's like that old prayer book says, in the midst of death, we are in life. In the midst of life, we are in death. So we all know we're going to die one day, and we should know. We should not think we're going to live forever like this. No. But we don't want to die. And if you're offered immortality, it would be a hard thing maybe to turn down, definitely. But you got to think about the price that'll have to be paid for that immortality. And if mankind tries to buy immortality his way, it's not going to turn out good. Remember the Frankenstein story. You create your own monster, and one day he will turn on you and destroy you. That reminds me very much of AI. Doesn't that remind you of it? That monster that you create has that ability to take you out if necessary. Don't ever forget that, because you are part of that monster, and that monster is part of you, no matter which way you look at it. That's Dr. Frankenstein learned that story a long time ago the hard way. It cost him a lot of bad things and a lot of things that he loved, but he learned that lesson. But we've never learned these lessons. It seems like we keep repeating them over and over and over again, these mistakes that we make. And we seem to never learn from these awful, awful mistakes that we make. But that's cloning. And it's scary. It definitely is a scary thought, especially when combined with dark science and AI. You got a very interesting weapon here too, okay, folks? Because covert companies can send in these clones or these doppelgangers, and they can do a lot of things. They could really screw up governments. Oh, think about it. And here's the thing that unsettles me the most about it all. Who could you ever really trust? It'll be like the X-Files. Trust no one. You couldn't trust anyone, because is that really a human being that you're talking about, that you're talking to, that you're dealing with, or is it something else? You won't really know. Don't forget Blade Runner. That was the interesting thing about Blade Runner, one of my favorite science fiction movies. And it is in our future, I believe, too. The Blade Runner did not know if it was human or robot. And I think he turned out and find out in the end that he was a robot. So he got the dirtiest trick of all played on him, didn't he? So it's very interesting what kind of future we may have ahead of us, definitely, thanks to this dark science. But now I want to turn to interesting aspects of doppelgangers. The doppelgangers are, in some aspects, a supernatural thing or a very paranormal subject, definitely. And I've had several cases of doppelgangers. It's very interesting cases. Here's an interesting thing that sticks in my mind about doppelgangers. Most of the time, not every time, but a lot of times, they turn out to be the evil nature of people. The evil side of us, As my friend Nighthawk likes to tell about the story about the two wolves inside of all of us. The white wolf and the black wolf, the good wolf and the bad wolf. Which one are you going to feed? But those wolves are inside of all of us. The good and the bad natures that we have, or as Abraham Lincoln called them, the good natures or bad natures, angels of our nature. The interesting thing is, what if your doppelganger shows up and he's sort of the evil version of you? Okay, that's a bad situation. You got to think about that a minute. But there are several different types of doppelgangers, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. The first doppelganger I'm going to talk about, of course, will be the man-made doppelgangers. Now, they could actually be not just clones, okay, not just somebody wearing a mask, not something AI come up with. They could actually be people that have been manipulated to look like you, like with plastic surgery or whatever the case may be, to really screw up your life. But what if these doppelgangers, like I said earlier, are not just that, but what if they are beings from another dimension or another alternate reality, and they're coming into our reality and screwing your life up? Here's an interesting example. I've always been one that, if I always go to look for a certain clothing item in the store, I have to have a certain size, okay? Because I'm a pretty tall guy and pretty good sized guy, so I have to have a certain size. Why is it this never there? Somebody's always bought it. It's almost as if my doppelganger showed up and bought my clothing before I got there. I've often thought about that. What if it is? What if he's going on, he's stealing these clothes from me? Okay, but anyway, you have to wonder, what if it did show up one day and started taking over your life, or screwing around with your life and messing your life up, having people turn against you, or say, hey, why did you do that for? Get on your case about something you didn't do that you were completely innocent about, What if that happened? That would be a bad situation, wouldn't it? How would you get rid of this doppelganger? How could you have to, here's the interesting thing about the doppelganger, and this is where he has an advantage over you. He knows you better than you know yourself. In other words, he is you to a certain extent. How can you fight against yourself? How could you outthink or outsmart yourself? Think about it. That'd be an interesting little battle that you'd have trying to go against this doppelganger. Because he knows all about you and knows what you think, how you think, what you're going to do next. Sort of like playing a chess game with someone that knows every move you're about to make. You're not going to get anywhere, are you? You're certainly not going to win that game. And that's the way it goes with a doppelganger. But now I've had some interesting cases of doppelgangers. I think I've talked about this before, but there was a lady come to me and said she had a very interesting thing happen. Said she was in the living room one day and her daughter came home. She heard her come in, heard her slam the door. I mean, really slam the door and stomp up the stairs. She saw her a little bit going up the stairs. Says she slammed the door in her room and just started tearing the room up. She was mad, screaming and hollering. She said, "What in the world has happened to my daughter? She come home from work like this? Something awful must have happened to her." So she started to go up the stairs, and about that time, the front door opened, and her daughter come in, the one that she saw. Okay, she said, "Where did you come from? You just went up the stairs." She said, "Oh, Mama, I just got home." She said, "I saw you go up the stairs. I heard you up in your room. You tore your room up." They went up there and opened the door, and nothing's messed up. Everything's fine. And the end of the story is the woman told me about, I saw my daughter. I heard her voice. I know she came in this house, but she didn't. What was that? Was that some kind of evil spirit masquerading as my daughter? Well, here's the one interesting aspect of this whole story that I investigated, was I found out that day the daughter did have an interesting episode at work, and she got very angry at one of her workers. Okay. But she didn't do anything. She didn't come home and all that. But did she? You have to wonder, did a part of her, maybe that psychic or spiritual part of her, triggered by this anger, and she went home, and part of her went home to the one safe place she knew to vent this anger. You have to wonder about that. Was this a psychic part of a person? Now, there's another kind of a doppelganger, which is a spiritual image of a person that shows up maybe miles away. And sometimes they help people out, or they do something good or comfort someone, but there's no way they could have done it. There's one very interesting story about a nun who lived in Spain, and she actually showed up in Mexico. Think about how far away that is from each other. Mexico and Spain, that's a long way. And on the same day, this nun showed up and comforted a person that she knew in a hospital. But how could she do that? She was still in Spain. But people at the hospital saw her. They interacted with her, and she prayed for this woman. And did her spirit transcend time and space and go from Spain to Mexico to pray for this woman? That's an interesting question, isn't it? So you've got a lot of interesting stories of doppelgangers like that. And the one thing that strikes me as strange, we do not know very much at all about the human spirit, the human mind and the spirit. what happens when they combine? What kind of power can they wield, especially in great times of emotional distress? You have to you think about all the stories you hear about people that lift cars up off of people. I know there's one very famous one about a little small woman that actually picked the front end of the car up to get a child out from under it. Stories like that, that adrenaline rush. It's got to be more than adrenaline, folks. There's something else going on here. We do not know what true power human beings have. And I think that goes into the aspects of faith, religious faith to a certain extent, too. We do not know what kind of powers can be unleashed by the human spirit and the human mind, especially when they're balanced together, and especially if it's a very traumatic and emotional thing. So, that's very interesting, and that's another aspect of the doppelgangers. And these doppelgangers can appear almost like ghosts in certain extents. I know there's one very famous story of one appearing on a ship at sea, and he warned these people there's a great storm coming. Pull down the sails and get ready to ride it out. And they believed this guy, but they found out later he was not on the ship. He was back on land. He had no way to get there. But was this sort of a thing that maybe perhaps God sent this as a warning to these people because they knew this man, and they took what he said to heart, and they survived that storm because of this. So you have to wonder, was this sort of a miraculous doppelganger kind of an episode? So you have a lot of different types of doppelgangers and stuff, and you have to wonder what's really going on with that. Why do we appear in places sometimes when we have no right to be? I've had people say I've had a doppelganger, and there was a guy that looked a little bit like me that people would actually say, hey, I thought it was you. So people can get confused sometimes. If you look a little bit like somebody, especially from maybe the back or the side, they can mix you up. I know we've all done that. You see somebody in a crowd, and you walk up to them, and you think it's somebody you know, and it turns out it's somebody completely different. That's the doppelganger of the human mind, I call it. It can fool you into believing that you're actually seeing someone that you're not, because you've got that person so much on your mind at that time, or you see something about that person that triggers recognition in your mind. That's another interesting form of the doppelganger. So what do you think? I want to hear some of your questions. What do you think about some of the doppelgangers, the masks that are out there, the masks that are being worn, and of course the cloning thing? It's very interesting aspects of it. Give me some feedback on it. You got any questions you want to ask about it or whatever? It's a very interesting subject, one of my favorites. And by the way, if you tune in to Demonology today, next Sunday at 9:00 p.m., I'll be doing the War on Christianity, so you definitely don't want to miss that. It's going to be a really good episode. And so anyway, doppelgangers, mask wearers, and clones. I think they're all in our future in a certain extent. Who knows what's going to come down the line, especially with AI and some other attributes and all that. And what amazes me about AI and all this, the perfect meld it has, the perfect integration between it and robotics, especially. See what Jimbo says. When I was younger, junior high school there, I would walk in place and they would look at me like I was a ghost, and I would say something like, "What happened?" They would say, "You were here." That has happened a lot of times, Jim. Definitely. I've had people say I've been somewhere and I wasn't there at all. But like I said, I think that's the doppelganger of the mind. I think people see you, somebody looks very similar to you, and they think it's you, and they get that thought in their mind so much that kind of fools them. That's true, Scott. It could be. I'm going to tell you this. I've had many, many cases of what we call crisis apparitions and all that. And I think sometimes God can send these things to us to help us or to comfort us in times of need. If I ever run into that problem, I certainly hope he will do that for me. Definitely. We want, a warning perhaps or some help, celestial help when we need it. So definitely, that is one thing, especially with these crisis apparitions. I know the very famous one was the ghost of Flight 401. Where these dead pilots would actually show up on different planes because they had the parts from the original plane that crashed. Very fascinating story. If you've never read about it, you'll get the book, The Ghost of Flight 401, a modern day ghost story. And it was hushed up by the major airline companies. They didn't want anybody to talk about it. To this day, they will not talk about it. They didn't, especially because a lot of those parts were put on other planes and stuff. Of course, I think it's all gone now, but they're very, very particular about talking about stuff like this, and especially do not let their pilots talk about UFOs and stuff like that. I know that without doubt. I have interviewed several airline pilots, and they've been hushed up definitely by that. So anyway, see what we got else here. I believe a doppelganger is a bad version of what we are, a balance to the universe, yin and yang. That's an interesting thought. And with all the bad people, there may be good doppelgangers and them being good too. That's another thought. Like I say, what if we have on our mind so much about doing something, or something is bothering us, or deep in our subconscious mind, and we actually sort of broadcast this image of ourselves somewhere. That's an interesting thought when it comes to doppelgangers. But like I was telling about the young lady that was angry that day, I had without a doubt feel that was her, but she was projecting her emotions psychically out, and letting them vent in a good way, I guess. It didn't hurt the doors that much, I don't think, but she didn't really tear the room up. But it was like, that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to come in and just trash everything. You ever get that mad? You really just want to tear everything up, and all that. Don't ever do that, though, folks. It's not good housekeeping, okay? But anyway, I feel that's probably what the case was. You're projecting yourself, your image, because, like I said, we do not know. There's so much that the human mind and the spirit, when they connect, I believe there is a definite power there to it. No, absolutely. Let's see what else we got here. Well, we really got looking out here. Let me see what we got here. See, Yolanda says at a quick of an eye out of the corner of my eye, I seem to see a little girl with black hair reaching out and smiling. I'm smiling, probably my younger self, I believe. That's a possibility. That I'm gonna tell you something, Yolanda, about memories. Okay, this is a known fact that the human mind retains everything we've ever seen or heard. It's there. It's not gone. It's there. It's recorded in the brain cells, but we can't recall them. You remember that movie Total Recall? If we all had total recall, some people have remembered their own birth. Think about that a minute. If you had total recall, you could remember everything you've ever seen or heard or felt or experienced. So memories can be an interesting thing. Sometimes I think memories can be so real that they almost transcend reality. Think about that. That's an interesting concept, that memories can do that. So I've actually, and I think a lot of people have experienced even memories of smell, not just sight, memories of sound, memories of smell, taste, feelings. I think all of that is trapped inside of us. It's recorded there, waiting to be let loose sometimes. So I was 17 working in the hang ten factory. My auntie and cousin swears this day they seen me with a man entering at a hotel even after my boss told her I was at work. That's interesting, I think a lot of times, like I said, people are triggered by someone that looks a lot like us. And I've seen people like that. I know you have too. You've seen people say, boy, that really looks like my brother, or that looks like my sister, or whatever. you're triggered by that. And sometimes, especially the distance in a crowd, you might say, oh, that looks like so and so, and you take it to be them. I'd say that's the mind doppelganger. I think that's a little trick of our minds, sort of like pareidolia, seeing Elvis in a piece of toast, and he's not really there, okay? But our minds can play tricks on us, definitely, and we're very susceptible to that. And I've told a lot of researchers and investigators, you've got to remember that. It's very important that you not forget how tricky the human mind can be. And your eyes can be fooled, your ears can be fooled, not just your mind, but the mind is behind all of it. You got to remember that. It runs the whole shebang, the whole show. So you got to guard against being fooled, because these things can trick you very, very easily. Yeah. But now, to me, the most interesting aspect about the mask, and we'll get back to that for just a moment. The mask, and I'd love to have one of these if I could look like somebody else I wanted to anytime I wanted to. That might be a real handy thing to have. The interesting thing about these masks, they do have flaws, okay? And I think we've seen some of them in some of the videos that we take. You can see the wrinkles, and you can see where the mask doesn't quite go down. And these masks actually go down a little ways on the chest here, a little ways supposedly, and down the back as well. But it still doesn't hide the wrinkles you can get, because these masks are not very thick, but they're very elastic, latex-like stuff. And they can wrinkle, and they can have, there can be little flaws in them. So, especially if, you don't have a good makeup artist to help you with the mask, definitely you would show up with some flaws. So that's an interesting thing about masks. Watch very closely, because, like I said, everything that appears to be what it is in this universe may not be that, okay? It may be something else altogether. It's a bad thing, folks, and in this world today and in the coming future of our lives, there's going to be so much less that we can really trust, like Blade Runner I talked about and some of these other movies. It's going to get to be a very scary, a very disturbing world when we don't know what it is. We can't even believe the evidence of our own eyes. It's like Edgar Allan Poe said, believe nothing that you hear and half of what you see. Well, we might not be able to believe anything that we see hardly anymore, because with all the holographic stuff, and I'm going to talk to a minute about holographs here for just a moment, because you can't leave them out of the equation here. But all of the stuff that's going on, they can fool us very easily, and we've got to be very, very on guard about this stuff. We've got to be very careful and not allow ourselves to be fooled by these, by whoever this is up to, whether it be some nefarious people from another parallel time, or our own people here, or our own clones, or whatever the case may be. We've got to be very careful, because we can't take everything at face value, okay? We've got to be very careful. But now I'll mention right quick holographs. There are holographic masks that they've been experimenting with. These are like plain face masks. They have no features, but they're triggered by a hologram underneath, which can take on the features of anybody they want to. They could look like any historical person, Adolf Hitler or Napoleon, or they could look like somebody off the street. They can actually sense the image that they want and use this. These holographic masks are amazing things. This is some really way out science fiction stuff that has become fact. And they are also trying to utilize this masking technology to turn people invisible. Think about that. So there's a lot of stuff out there that's dark science is into. And that's like I said before about dark science. If we really, really, truly knew what was going on with this dark science, we probably would never sleep well again. Definitely. I don't anyway. I tell you what, folks, this knowledge is not good to know, but yet it is in a way. You want to be forewarned. It's not a happy knowledge, but knowledge is knowledge, and knowledge is power. Okay, I have a little thing on my desk here that says power Knowledge is power, and that's so very, very true. The power to live our lives and to be on guard and to safeguard our lives and our families and everything we hold dear hinges on knowledge. And that's why we need shows like this. We need to talk about these topics and bring them out into the open and discuss them more. The things that are going on in the dark shadows of our world, the things they don't want us to know about, you know. They don't like to be pulled into the light, okay? And it's like I've said before, the darkness is great, but the light is by far greater. Okay, and the light's on our side, as long as the light of truth is what we seek. You know, that's what we've got to seek. And that's the good thing about talking about these things and having subjects to discuss like this. Get it out in the open and talk about it. And we need to talk to and tell other people about it. You know. And that brings me to this part of the show where I say you need to heart us, share us out, tell other people about it. If you enjoyed this conversation tonight, tell some other people about it. Get your friends and neighbors, tune in. We're going to have some very interesting topics to talk about. And I will in the future very soon have some guests. Oh, yeah, definitely. We're going to have some guests. I would like to get a few of the some well-known writers on here to talk to you about some of the very interesting books that they're coming out with. So we're going to definitely do some other things definitely as well. And I think you're going to find next week's show to be rather interesting. What we'll be talking about next week, and that's the living dinosaurs. That's going to be an interesting little subject, I think. And but anyway, next week. That's next week. And like I said on Demonology Today, next Sunday night at 9, the war on Christianity. I think you're going to really find that very interesting. Another very hot topic that's on everybody's mind nowadays. And so, like I say, you let me know, give me some feedback, some stuff you want to talk about, you want to hear about, whatever. Like I say, the lines are open, okay? This is not a one-way show, folks. This is a two-way show between you and me. You're a part of the show. I want your feedback. I want your comments. Like I say, spread us out, talk about us, recommend us to other people. Share our link, share the links out, heart, and share us out. The more audience we get, the better. The more feedback we can get in here, the better it'll be. So I really appreciated you showing up here tonight and listening to my little conversation on clones and masks and doppelgangers. I hope they're not too big in our future, but I have a bad feeling they probably are. The interesting thing about clones, there is a good side to cloning, okay? I know that sounds weird, but there is a good side. It could be a way to bring back species that go extinct, and that would be good in a certain way. It's not, like the snow leopard and some other things, to know that they won't disappear forever. I would love to see a dodo bird, okay? I would definitely want to see a woolly mammoth. That is good, but you got to be very careful how you do these things. We don't want to create another Jurassic Park, do we? Definitely. And you got to be very careful. Science is a great tool, but like I said earlier, it can turn against you, and that's what you got to really beware of. And dark science has that attribute because it's a hidden, secretive, nefarious type of science that tries to break the boundaries of the real, true science in this world. I'm a very scientific-minded person. I like the scientific approach. I've always used that in a lot of my investigation and research. The scientific approach is best when utilized and used correctly, okay? That's the main thing. Science, like anything else in this world, can be used or misused, and that's when we have to be very careful about it. But I really appreciate you showing up and tuning in tonight, and we're going to turn the lights out here in the grotto very shortly. And I wish you all a very good week ahead until we meet again on here. And be careful and keep us in your prayers. and keep a smile on your face, but keep a watch very closely at what's going on around you, okay? And until then, until we meet again, vaya con Dios.